Well, Howard, man, it's great to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to this one, man. This is an important topic, especially nowadays, dealing with young people and maybe their attitudes, their work ethic, and so many other things that we can definitely improve upon as young people today. We're looking forward to our conversation. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to see you.
Yes, sir. Good to see you too, man. Living over close to Cali now. How's life in
Yeah,
Arizona?
yeah, man. It's different from anything I know, but making it work out here.
Well, that's what's up,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, it's a
Hey,
lot different.
well, hey, when you get some time, man, check out those Suns. I mean, they on the verge of they got the Lakers in some trouble. So we're gonna see,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. That's something me and the man have to do, definitely.
Well, who you got? I don't know if you've been watching the game that much, but who you got your money on? Phoenix or LA?
You know, of course, LA is going to get it. I think LA is going to get it. Got Brown out that way.
Yeah.
Much as I hate to say it, but you know, I have been impressed with Phoenix. I was telling, I always joke with the people here about Phoenix. This is the place where athletes come to die
Yeah.
in their athletic career. You got Shaq, you got Nash, you just keep going on and on and on. And now at the Cardinals, they have what's his name? Um, I forgot his name, but
Fitzgerald.
well, Fitzgerald's over there, but start with a J. I don't know, it's slipping my mind. But anyway, yeah, we'll see what happens now that he over here, if he proved what I say to be true or not. But Arizona seems to be the place where athletes go to kill their career.
Man, I never thought of it. I mean, there is some evidence to back that up. I just never thought of it that way. That's man,
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
Well, man, if you don't mind, I just want to make a little space before we get too far in the conversation for you to go ahead and introduce yourself so people can know you better.
All right, I'm Howard Odom. I'm out in Arizona in Sholo area. I appreciate the High Country Church of Christ. I've been here for a year and a half, a little over a year and a half. Um, I'm married to Amanda Odom, of course. We have a little one on the way. Be due August 21st of this year. We're excited. Little boy, very happy about that. Um, we're on here talking about being coachable. In my time past, I've served as a coach. I've been active in sports, of course, throughout my middle school and high school, or even in Pee Wee. I started playing football in fourth grade in Ohio, Portsmouth, Ohio, and I have been active in sports ever since. I played football, played basketball, I ran track. Well, I did track and field, mainly field events, shot put and discus, and I wrestled
Hmm.
in my high school career. So I'm very active, or have been very active in sports, and even in my adult years. Here in recent times, I got back into competing when it comes to weightlifting. Did that in Alabama and Mississippi area. Uh, and so, that's just a little bit about myself. Oh, coaching. Yeah, I coached a few years, 3 years there in Alabama, in Butler area where Daniel is very familiar with. And so, that's just a little bit about me.
Well, absolutely, man. Of course, I told you before we hit the record button that I am very thankful. Being from Butler, reared there, I'm thankful for everything you've done for my community, man. Just giving it some hope, giving those kids hope, and providing them a role model and a father figure. Many of them don't have that at home, so I know Butler is not the easiest place to adapt and just to even provide hope. I mean, it's just
Right.
yeah,
Yes, you're
it's not
absolutely
easy.
right.
So I'm thankful, and I'm sure I can speak for those guys and girls that you influence, man. I know they're thankful as well. So uh, kudos to you for that, for sure.
Sure. Thank you.
So we want to talk about this idea of being coachable. Now, of course, I'm a Bama fan, so roll tide.
Oh, me.
So we're gonna start off with that. We're gonna start off with that.
We won't hold it against you.
In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and put this up here.
Oh no.
The all-time great and honorable
Oh
Nicholas
no.
Saban. He
Oh no.
always talk about he always talk about this idea of being coachable in
Mhm,
training camp. And he tells his players, he said, "Hey, listen, you need to be able to take constructive criticism from myself and from the other
mhm.
coaches. If you're talking while I'm talking, you can't be coached. If you're responding while I'm talking, you can't be coached. If you have an attitude, as soon as you walk on the field when we're trying to coach you and instruct you on how to do something better, and the first thing you want to do is respond out of defense, out of defending yourself, you can't be coached." So these are just some of the things that Nick Saban, really, really is an artist and porter of when it comes to being coachable. And I just want to dive into that idea of what does it mean to be coachable?
um, to be coachable, uh, for me, it has a lot to do with attitude. A lot of times you look at, or coaches sometimes look at kids and they look at skill when they look at someone being coachable. But I think it's much more than that. I think it involves attitude, or it is the attitude of the player. Michael Jordan said himself, "My best skill was that I was coachable," and then he followed that by saying, "I was a sponge and aggressive to learn."
Mm,
Very much like what Nick Saban, you say Nick Saban said. Um, being coachable, I have the right attitude. I'm a sponge. I'm soaking up information. I'm acceptive to criticism. I'm trying to better myself, and any information I can get to do that, I'm receptive to. As you think of the idea of being coachable or what it means, to me also it involves, or it means to be humble, display humility. uh, Someone who is coachable knows he's not perfect.
mm.
He knows he needs improvement. He knows he doesn't have all the answer. He knows he needs help. And so he's willing and ready to receive the help. And he's put himself in a position to ask questions so he can better himself.
Right, right. It reminds me of Tim Duncan, man. Tim Duncan, they call him Mr. Fundamental.
Yes,
And at
sir.
first I thought like, man, this guy's whack. Like he's always doing the basic stuff, the turnaround hook shot or the back you down off the glass and the square on the glass into the basket. And I'm thinking like, man, why is this guy playing so old school? But I mean, look at this guy, 5 rings.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
multiple
Absolutely.
All-Star appearances, just inducted into the Hall of Fame recently. And so, I mean, it obviously being coachable, which he was very coachable. I mean, many of his teammates would say how coachable Timmy was, how great an attitude Tim Duncan had, and I mean, just an all-around great teammate. And so, obviously, being coachable influenced the greatness that he had in his career.
Yes,
And
sir.
you and I being Christians, man, it obviously has a benefit for us in this sense of sort of taking what we see from athletes and they're being coachable.
Mhm.
How will this help improve the attitude, the work ethic, the spiritual walk of a Christian?
Uh, Being coachable, how will that help improve the attitude of a Christian?
Hmm.
Um, well, being coachable, like I said, is displaying is displaying humility, and um, it's displaying it's not having self in the way. Um, I'm trying to think what the well. Repeat the question for me again.
Yeah, no problem. When you so how will this idea of being coachable, as it we know that it's good and beneficial for athletes, right? I mean, we just used Tim Duncan as an example. It gave him the great career that he had. How
Right.
will this idea of being coachable improve the attitude, the work ethic, or the spiritual walk of a Christian?
Um, it, it helps improve the work ethic, the attitude, by displaying the attitude of humility, um, by knowing, like I said, and defining what being coachable is having a humble disposition, knowing that you don't have the answers, know all the answers, knowing that you need the help, so on and so forth. And so it helps them keep the right perspective and having the right attitude of things. Also, being part of being coachable is being disciplined. And so, as far as the work ethic goes, it helps him to be self-controlled. It helps him to be committed. It helps him to be proactive. It helps him to uh, be all of those things, set boundaries, so on and so forth, so that he can reach the end goal.
Right. It's interesting even when you think about this idea of coaching and how we can look at athletes who are coachable and has presented themselves that way throughout their entire career, and even looking at those who had a hard time with it and then have to struggle along and then find out that, hey, listen, the only way for me to be successful is to listen to my coaches, to do what they ask of me, to be respectful. I think about Peter. Peter had, he had some different battles in his life, being a disciple of Christ and following along with him and trying to implement the things that Jesus was teaching into his own life. And then you get towards the end where Jesus said, Peter, when you are converted, when you are converted, then
Mm,
feed my sheep. It's like some people take that as a like, oh man, that's a low blow. No, it's not a low blow. It's saying like, okay, Peter had to bump his head a lot. But then
yeah.
eventually later in life, Peter was going to finally get it, prove himself to be coachable. Like, hey, listen, I can implement the things of Christ, and now I'm going to strive to help you do that. And I think we can learn a valuable lesson from athletes, even the ones who weren't as coachable early on in their career, and then prove themselves to be more coachable towards the end. This Going back to this idea of humility. I know you mentioned humility a lot, and being coachable does show that an athlete is humble because
Hmm.
they don't feel that they know everything about the game. They don't feel that they know everything about their individual position, even. But I want to talk about this idea of humility. How, or in your perspective, does humility ever involves humiliation?
um, So I guess the answer could be yes and no, depending on where you going or looking for with that. Because I am humble, or because I have humility, you look at the life of Jesus, you look at the life of many others who had a disposition of humility. Because of that, they oftentimes were the victims of humiliation. You look at the life of Jesus, of course, the walk of shame, going there to his own demise, his own death, and then there on the cross was all, as we would see, humiliating. You look at the life of the Christian, suffering persecution and all that as a result of humility that we have, where people take advantage of that and humiliation follows. Uh, and so if you're thinking in that way, or if you ask them a question in that way, well, absolutely.
Mm,
Um, but if you're asking if humiliation, and I don't know if this is what you're asking, if humiliation leads to or causes humility, when I looked up the word humiliation, it comes from the Latin word um, humiliar or something. I butchered it. I know I didn't say it right, but it means to be humbled.
mm,
And from my experiences with coaching, there were times when a coach would humiliate a player because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing, and the coach is trying to achieve that goal to get him to do what he's supposed to do. And it always had the opposite effect of what the coach wanted. you know, and him humiliating that player. Well, he does not listen. He goes into a shell. He becomes even more self-conscious or self-aware, and he become repelled to you. It does not work.
mm.
It does not help the cause.
You
And
know,
so,
go ahead, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was about to say that is a great point. I wanted to jump in before I got the thought. Before I forgot the thought, when you think about this idea of like humility ever causing humiliation. And by the way, you were spot on. By the way, that's exactly how I was thinking about it. I could recall several instances when I was, especially in basketball, man. We had a guy by the name of Smith, Coach Smith, who was there. I think he moved on to Alabama State. I can't remember when exactly he left. I think it was 2014 and 2015. But either way, this guy didn't mind. I mean, jacking you up before you got in the game, or he used to have this thing KYP, which is an acronym for Know Your Personnel. That means, as a guard, myself and the other guards and a small forward who could handle the ball, we were not to give the ball to the big man at all. Like, even if we were trapped, we were not to give them the ball. There
Right.
were there were some times in the game I felt like I just couldn't avoid that, and I had to disobey his rule,
Right.
and he would take me to the side and like, KYP, like, don't you understand this? Don't you get this? Like, you just gonna do your own thing and all that. It just make you angry. But
Right. Yeah.
I kind of think back to what I remember a fellow Christian asking in Bible study one time when Peter cut off Malchus's ear. He was doing it to do what? He was doing it to protect Jesus.
Protect Jesus. Right.
Right. I mean, and many people get that, right? But some may say he was doing it to further his own cause or get recognition for himself. I think I don't know. I think that's a little bit far fetched. I believe that he was doing it to ultimately protect Jesus, but for
Right.
Jesus to respond in the way that he did, like, essentially rebuke him for doing that. Most
Right.
people say, well, he humiliated Peter. Well, if he did, the idea and the word that you use, the Latin word humiliare, to humble, right? I mean, that idea of being humiliated means that you are almost being forced to be humble. And that doesn't feel good. It
Right.
doesn't feel good at all. And so when it comes back to this idea of humiliation and humility ever involving that, I think it does. I think you're absolutely right. It does involve that. Sometimes, not in every case and instance, but it does, involve humiliation some of the time. But
Well,
as a Christian, I want you to, how do you respond to that? And go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting your thought, but go ahead.
no, no. Yeah, I thought you were finished. I'm sorry. I was. Humiliation can be what leads to humility. But
Mhm.
oftentimes, when you look throughout Scripture, in the Old Testament, going to the New Testament, the Peter, James, you go to back to Exodus, even Proverbs. It talks about the humbling of self. Uh, and so it is something inward. Humiliation is something that is outward. It can be what causes the humility, but the same thing that hardens also softens. And so and saying that it depends on the heart of
Right.
the individual. Remember Mike Tyson being prepared for a fight. I can't remember who it was he was fighting. Was it Frazier? No, I can't remember who Mike Tyson was fighting. But anyway, Mike Tyson before the match was saying how he was going to beat this guy to a pulp and so on and so forth. And they got into the ring, and Mike Tyson got whooped. And after the fight, Mike Tyson said on national TV that I respect you. He was humbled, if you will. And so, most certainly, humiliation. He got beat to a pulp in the ring, and and now he was forced to eat those words, and so it can lead to humility, but could also lead to the opposite. Like
Right.
I was saying, and trying to humiliate an athlete on the football field, especially in front of other athletes, it's not going to end well. It was the same thing when I was in law enforcement. If you had something to say to when I worked in the prison, you had something to say to an inmate. You didn't do it in front of everybody to humiliate them because you're not going to get the response that you want. You take them aside and you actually try to teach them whatever it is you're trying to teach them.
And you know what? And I think that's probably one of the primary struggles that a lot of young people have today. And we're just gonna jump into that really quick. What do you think, in your perspective? Uh, what are some of the primary reasons that many young people, especially young Christians, are not coachable today?
Uh, well, we live in a society where everyone has their own truth. We live in a society where all people's opinions are equally valued. You got your opinions, I have my opinions, and uh, there's no absolute right.
Mm,
And I think that mindset and that attitude makes many kids, many athletes uncoachable because coach says this. Well, the way I feel about it, the way I think about it is different. It's the naming effect. And naming was told to go dip into the Jordan. Well, he had a better way. God didn't. He forgot about these other rivers. And so, being opinionated and having your own opinion and putting your opinion up with others' opinions or your truth up with other people's truth makes people uncoachable. Also, you said what makes many people uncoachable. Um, I think a big one for me, at least, and dealing with kids is being embarrassed.
mm,
Um, Out there on the football field in the classroom, kids don't ask questions. Why? Well, because they don't want to be felt like they're stupid or looked at as they're stupid by their peers. It's even, I remember being in Butler and, some smart kids even acted dumb, played dumb, made bad grades. They could have made better, but it was all in being perceived a certain way by their peers.
mm,
And so being embarrassed when you're trying to, as a coach, you're trying to, I was defense or lineman coach, offense and defensive line, and trying to get the kids to do what it is properly they were supposed to do. You instruct them. Well, in instructing them, having good intentions, they still got embarrassed because they weren't doing it correctly, and that caused them to go into a shell.
mm.
And they became uncoachable. And they got into their feelings, so on and so forth. And I think just embarrassment is a big thing when it comes to a lot of youth.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's even, still I'm only 24, so I'm not too far removed from teenage years at all. And this it's difficult trying to speak to teenagers today, man. I feel like there's this cultural gap between the way that they were reared and the way versus the way that I was reared. Growing up in the South, especially in the Bible Belt, as we talked about earlier, we had a different type of rearing, man. Like we got you didn't get a lot of talking to. You got a beating, a beat down.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was just all around. I mean, it was just totally different, man. But then at the same time, I don't know if it speaks to uh, the force, the sort of unmeasurable amount of force that people in authority are using versus young people that turns them off from this type of or this idea of coaching, or if it speaks to the opposite, the softness of young people today. This, how they're super sensitive to things. Being told no is a big deal now, and
Absolutely.
can even follow with a lawsuit if you play your cards right. But that's another topic for another day. But I think it is the things that you mentioned. I think are absolutely correct, and it sort of leads to this next thing. And I know that you'll be more privy to this than other people since you dealt with athletes more so than others. In your personal opinion, man, what are some reasons that athletes reject coaching? And are these reasons similar to why Christians reject the teachings of Jesus or some of the teachings of Jesus?
Um, some reasons why athletes reject coaching. I think it could be, of course, it is a number of things. It could be the coach himself and the way his method of coaching. Trying to humiliate to get them to do what it is he wants for them to do. Coaches sometimes are demeaning, and they talk down to the athletes, and they they push the athlete away to where they cannot help them. Sometimes it's the player, the athlete. He thinks he knows more than the coach.
Mm,
I've dealt with that on many occasions or some occasions in coaching where I had a student or two who thought they knew more than me as a coach, even though I've been in their shoes, and I've advanced farther than they have.
mm,
Um, and they thought they knew more than me, and so they rejected the coaching to some degree. Um, it's the coaches sometimes it's the athletes. Other times I think it's the home life. You have parents, parents are seem to be better coaches than the coaches themselves. you know, and I remember dealing with parents on many occasions there while coaching in Butler. The coaches seem to knew more than the parents, excuse me, seem to knew more than the coaches. And at home, I know because many students would come and tell me, or many athletes, the parents are talking about the coaches, and the coaches to them don't know anything, don't know nothing, and so that gets ingrained within that child, that attitude, that way of thinking towards the coach, and he brings that attitude on the football field,
Hmm.
and it goes back to the parents. And so there are many factors that factor into why a child or an athlete is rejecting the uh, the coaching of the coach.
Right. You know, it's
Mhm.
funny because there are two players that come to mind even when I ask this question, man. And I don't know if you've seen. I'm pretty sure you've seen them play and a lot of their highlights. But Steven Jackson and Demarcus Cousins,
Yeah.
two players who play professional basketball. I think Demarcus Cousins is obviously still playing. They are deemed two of the most uncoachable players in basketball. And I recall, man, if you, I mean, Cousins, like he'll have his moments where he just cut up, man. He loses his head and think that the position that the coaches are putting him in is just a bad or stupid position, and he can't excel from that position. And there may be legitimate, reasons that he's presented to the coach, but at the same time, it's like, as you stated, man, is he stating those positions or his concerns in a respectful way, or is he coming to the coach like, hey, listen, I know what is going to guarantee me success. You don't understand, and all of that stuff. Most of the time, it was the latter, right? You don't understand. I know what's going to make me successful. I'm wondering if this kind of attitude, the reasons that you gave, in your perspective, do you think that these are the same, if not similar, reasons as to why some Christians reject some of the teachings of Jesus?
um, Yeah, absolutely. And before I get off into that, just backing up, you said something that made me think. So we had a coach that came in my second year of coaching, and he was a local boy, grew up in the area, of course, on the south end. He went and played college football. Not only did he go and play college football, he went as far as the pros and played in the NFL. Well, he came back to the community and he was coaching. He was the head coach, and he watched the team, watched the film from the previous year. We went out there on the field, and he just watched everybody in the positions that they had previously, and he began making adjustments, changing people to what he thought was a better position for them.
Mm.
And Christian Smith was one of these guys. He got highly upset. He was used to playing one position, and he got moved to another position that coach thought was better for him.
Right.
Well, he got upset. Not only him, there was another guy. He was the quarterback before the coach came, and coach said, "No, that's not your position. We want you at linebacker. We're gonna put you over here." And he got highly upset. These guys, they would come to practice. They would have bad attitudes. They would have their arms folded. They'd be in the back talking while we're coaching, and so on and so forth. And it took me realizing what was going on to talk to them, to get them to change their thinking about things, and they end up being successful at their position that they were changed to, even more so than what they have been previously in other
Mm.
positions. But their attitude was wrong. They thought they knew better than the coach. I'm better at this position. Why are you moving me over here? And so, yeah, that their attitude, determined their actions, and they became uncoachable at least for a period of time.
Right.
Um, but are these some of the similar reasons as to why Christians reject the teachings of Jesus? Absolutely. The home life plays a big part of it when it comes to that, especially of younger Christians and their parents. The parents and how they talk or interact at home about. the church, about the preacher, about spiritual things. Uh, that leads many Christians, young Christians, to be repelled from church,
Right.
not want to come to church. Um, it has it is a very similar thing, from the football field to the spiritual walk.
No,
Uh,
it reminded me of Moses too. Like just when I heard that when I just listened to the example that you gave, like knowing more than the coach, and embarrassment. I think embarrassment was one of the reasons you gave
right.
that
Yeah.
young people don't or present themselves as being uncoachable today. And that's extremely true, man. You remember Moses gave a couple excuses as to why he couldn't go. You know, he's like, I
Yes.
don't speak well, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I just found it
Absolutely.
interesting what when God has something in store for you to do, man, it doesn't matter if he had to give you a sidekick. I mean, a translator, whatever you need. I mean, you're gonna be doing it. And
Yes, sir.
Moses found himself in that position and he was doing that. And I think, I can't sit here and act like or pretend I've never been in that position before, man. I've gave some serious excuses as to why I can't do something that this person who had more experiential wisdom than I did, I would say something like, I don't think that's cut out for me, or I don't know if I necessarily like this particular route. Maybe I'm gonna take this one. And a lot of the times it is, they don't want to, or they think they know more than the coach in that situations. And believe it or not, I know that you are already aware of this. There are some Christians who believe they know more than Jesus.
Absolutely.
Jesus says, "Love your enemies." Why in the world would I do that? Right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
about to hate. They can kill me. I'm about to hate these people. Like, absolutely not. Like, if I am going to get my revenge, even though revenge is supposed to be left up to God. So there are a lot of ways and a lot of areas that we think, we are smarter than Jesus. Just last week, I had a conversation with a untraditional atheist, which is what she classified herself. Never heard that terminology before. Never heard of that particular adjective used to describe what kind of atheist she was. But at any way, she said that because she was like, I believe in Christianity, parts of it anyway, but the parts I don't believe with is the submission of women and how the your religion is anti-women. Women can't do this, women can't do that. And I said, well, did you get the context of any of those sections of scripture that you were reading? And she said, well, I don't need the context of that. I just know that's wrong. And I'm thinking, like, well, if we agree that there's a God and that God has already set the standard, then who am I to come up with a new standard that all of a sudden is supposed to subject his standard to mine? Again, it goes back to the idea I know more than God,
Absolutely.
which is a problem that many people struggle with.
Yes. Even here, I've had to deal with people, and funny you say, the roles of women. It was it was dealing with that, where you're teaching what the Bible says, and you teach it in this context of First Timothy. Of course, the context of First Timothy chapter 2 is in the broader context of First Timothy chapter 3 verses 15 and 16. And as I was teaching that, well, people, women in particular, began to get upset and began to give their input in how now they're going to tell you what God was really thinking. And so I feel like, or I think that what God really meant was this or that, and they began to elevate themselves above God, not knowing, and now you know more than God.
Right. It's one of those difficult and sticky situations for sure, man. Like, I try my best to hear people out, make sure that, I don't present them with any type of hostility or anything like that, even if we do disagree. And as a Christian, I can wholeheartedly say this: there are some things that I may not agree with, and as it relates to God stating this as the standard, I may think like, what? But at the same time, I submit myself to it because I submit myself to God. I don't pretend that I know more than He knows. I don't,
Correct.
even though I may
Absolutely.
not agree with it. So, I just think maybe we can take that for as food for thought. Consider that before we make this decision to just totally reject the teachings of Jesus. So one of the other questions I wanted to ask really quickly is this idea of coachable biblical characters. And I know that we can learn a lot from characters. In fact, probably some of the best Bible study that I've ever been privileged to have is studying a biblical character, because these people, a lot of people see Jesus as unattainable.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying don't study Jesus, but I know for me, it has helped to study the lives of other biblical characters who had similar struggles and still showed that it's possible to remain faithful to Christ even though you had those struggles. Are there some biblical characters that come to mind to you that you consider coachable, and how can we implement their characteristics, their responses to difficult situations in our own lives to prove ourselves to be coachable?
Well, it's funny you say that. The perfect example is Jesus the Christ. If he is our perfect example, our hupogrammos to follow after. The Bible does say, let us know. It doesn't record specifically, but he was tempted in all ways like we, yet without sin. And so, striving to be like him, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11 verses 1, be ye followers of me as I am of Christ. But yeah, you have people who were coachable outside of Jesus. I think of Abraham. He comes to mind in Genesis chapter 12, beginning at verse 1. He was told to leave everything he knew and to serve a God that was not the God of his people. And so, and he did so. He had humility. He was committed. He was disciplined, so on and so forth. You have Noah. He comes to mind.
Hmm.
Um, being told to build the ark with these dimensions, 120 years. Noah labored towards this cause, being coachable. He was disciplined, and he was committed. I think of Paul. Paul is a great example of what it is to be coachable,
Absolutely.
um, living his life contrary to God, and then coming to find out he was doing such, he then changed and had the same type of zeal in doing for God as he was in doing contrary to him. You could pick any number one of the apostles. Um, these were all coachable people, examples that we see throughout Scripture.
It's fascinating that you mentioned Noah. Noah has always been one of those unique characters to me because God told him to build an ark, a man who had never seen
Never,
rain.
never seen rain.
Never seen rain. I'm thinking
Yeah.
like, what would have been going through his mind? Like, you say it's gonna rain. You want me to build this because it's gonna rain? Okay. He just built it. He built the ark, and what Genesis 6:8, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and I think
Mhm.
get down to verse 22, and he did all that the Lord had commanded, everything, the
Yes, sir.
dimensions, everything, and
Mhm.
some people would consider that to be well, God is too legalistic, or he's too detailed. And I mean, Noah followed every detail.
Yeah.
And again, after having never seen rain before, man, it's
Yeah.
just it's
That,
unique to me.
that's that sticks out in my mind as well, and that's why I said it. You see what the thinking by far was of the people there, who thought Noah was a madman,
Hmm.
for doing this. But yeah, he stayed committed, and he was consistent. He did all that the Lord asked for him to do, and so that
Absolutely.
made him coachable.
You know what? As we prepare to close, man, I just wanted to ask this one. There is this idea that Christians cannot be or attain or implement some of the characteristics that NBA athletes have or NFL athletes have or any type of professional collegiate athletes, in the sense that we may not be athletic ourselves, at least some of us, and that doesn't mean that we can't learn from their responses. That doesn't mean that we can't learn from their attitudes, and some of their I guess you would call it personality that elevate them to the next level, allows them to be great. And it's not to say that we're trying to be great in Christianity per se, but we can be great at reflecting the light of Christ and showing that light to others who so desperately need it. And so, does Jesus teach this idea of being coachable? And if so, what are some practical ways that you can leave us with today regarding how we can become coachable Christians.
Yeah, this idea of being coachable, I think we see all throughout the scripture or even throughout the New Testament in Jesus' teaching in a form of humility. When you go over to Matthew chapter 18, verses 4, it says, whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same as the greatest in the kingdom. Matthew chapter 23, verses 11 and 12. Sort of kind of the same thing. The one who exalts himself shall be abased. The one, I'm mixing it all. But he that is the greatest among you shall be your servant, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he shall be humble, and he shall humble himself he that humble himself shall be exalted. Excuse me. And then Matthew 11 verses 29, Jesus gives for him an example, as an example of what it is to be coachable. When he says, take my yoke upon you and learn me, for I'm meek and lowly at heart or in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. And John chapter 13 verses 1 through 17. I'm washing the disciples' feet. He is teaching them the attitude that they're to have in being servants. Another word for that is being displaying humility, which this was opposite of what they had at one point. When you go to Luke chapter 22 and verses 24, they was arguing about who's going to be the greatest. And so, but being coachable, by far, as I start off by saying, this is displaying humility. You ask, what are some ways in which we can be coachable? Um, having there's the old saying that you heard playing sports. I heard playing sports.
Right.
A lot of people have heard in playing sports. Um, this attitude of there's no I in team.
Right.
If I'm going to be coachable, I gotta have humility. It's not about me. When you look at team, it's spelled TEAM. It's not spelled I. And so you have to remove self out of the equation. You have many people who play sports. They think the team is terrible. The team is no good, and so they're out to look for number one. I'm gonna go out and do what I got to do to make myself look good. And in all actuality, what you do is hurt the team.
Right.
Although you may be a good player, although you may put some points up on the board, well, you hurt the team as a whole because you have this selfish mentality. In the church, the same thing is true. We can come to develop that I when it comes to the team. We're to be unified, and I breaks up the unity, make it all about me, and the church is hurt as a result. So they're having there's no I in team attitude. Um, Also, we have to embrace our roles. We talked about one of the players who could not or could not see himself embracing that role, and as a result, his attitude became poor, and he became uncoachable.
Right.
We have to embrace our roles and know that all roles are play a important part in the success as a whole of the team. And so embracing that role, the same thing is true in the church. When it comes to men, a lot of men need to embrace that role of men in leadership. When it comes to women, as we were talking about, embracing that role and understanding the role that God has given you in submission when it comes to that of men in the scheme of things. Younger people embracing that role, and older people embracing that role. You see, I was talking to someone here recently. You don't see uh, what the Bible speaks on concerning older towards younger women and men, and teaching them and so on and so forth. There's just not many people embracing those roles. So embracing your role in the church as well as on the field or on the basketball court or wherever uh, helps to be coachable.
Mm.
Also, um, another thing is not being a teen cancer.
Mm,
When you think about cancer,
that's true.
uh, cancer it starts off small, but it spreads, and it's very deadly. Um, and coaching and even playing sports, when you will see somebody who's dissatisfied with the way things are. Um, Maybe their parents have implanted this thought within their head, or maybe they themselves have this thought of dissatisfied with the coaches. And now, instead of themselves dealing with it, instead of leaving the team or whatever it is, they become a cancer to the rest of the team. They try to turn people against the coaches. I've experienced that in my few years of coaching. One person dissatisfied, and so they then try to turn other people against me, um, and they themselves become uncoachable as well as the other people on the team. And so, curing the team or curing that cancer or not being a team cancer uh, leads to one being coachable, displaying humility, asking questions, um, all these things, being disciplined, being committed. All these things are what makes for a person being coachable, both physically and spiritually.
Man, I really appreciate that, especially the embrace one, man. I think I took that one to heart there. You definitely want to embrace roles. There are some roles that aren't ideal, and they may not be ideal according to human standards, but they're especially ideal according to God's standard. And you could think about a lot of key players who help secure victories and in sporting games and things of that nature. I think about Lou Williams. That man has been the sixth man forever, like winning multiple six man of the year. James Harden early on in his career was six man and did an exceptional job at that. Unfortunately, they weren't able to secure the title, but I mean, he
Right.
he did well and embraced his role while that was his role. And so definitely appreciate that. That one right there definitely resonated with me.
I'm just thinking. There's an old sports movie called Rudy.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I see that.
Rudy, he wanted to be on the team, but just didn't meet the standards of what it was to be on the team. And Rudy embraced the idea of being on the practice team, and he embraced that role of helping them, the people who actually played on Saturday, helping them to become better. He embraced his role. In the church, you sometimes have people who don't embrace their role. They want to be the person out front. They want to be, there's sometimes there's those in the audience who envy the preacher and want to be the preacher, and so they become the preacher from the pews.
Right.
Uh, there's many different, you can insert many different things there, but we're not always embracing of our roles. We aren't. And Rudy was okay with being on the practice squad and knowing that he was helping those who started prepare for Saturday. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
you
I
know,
mean, everybody can't be Peter, right? Some people got to be
right?
Andrew.
Yes,
And
sir.
and Andrew, definitely, I think embraced his role, brought his brother to Christ, and I mean, look, his brother, I guess many would consider had a more prominent position, in that regard. But I mean, you never see Andrew and him bickering or fighting over anything like that. I mean, it was trivial, right? I mean,
Yes,
it's
sir.
this is your role to play, and
Yes,
just play it well. I mean, be exceptional in the role that you have for now.
yes,
And
sir.
so definitely thankful for that, man. Before we head out, I just wanted to briefly give you some space to tell people how they can listen to your sermons. I know that you preach over in Arizona now. If you'll just refresh our memory with the name of that
Yeah.
congregation and maybe a YouTube page or something like that.
Yeah, you can. Well, I preach over here at the High Country Church of Christ in Sholo, Arizona. We just recently created a page there, a YouTube page, but not a. You can look us up at the High Country Church of Christ.com, and on there, there's a link to where you can watch us live. Also, we have a YouTube page. You can go over there to High Country Church of Christ, and you can check out previous recordings as well there.
Okay. Well, man, thank you for that. Thank you so much for being on the episode today. It was a treat having you, man, and good getting catch up with you. And I hope you guys have a healthy son. And
Yes, sir.
boy, if you had a girl, then we already talked about that.
Yeah. I
Uh,
told him that, yeah, the next one we'll be
yeah.
working on.
We'll have some competition with old Grace that's coming here soon.
Yeah,
So
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. But man,
well,
I appreciate you having me on the show. It's a great work you're doing, and I appreciate all that you do for the Lord.
well, man, thank you so much, man. Please tell the wife we say hello, and you guys take care.
You do the same. All right, have a good one.